So Matt, thank you so much for joining me today. We've got a lot to talk about here, but you had a moment this week that went incredibly viral while you were giving a report on the weather in Mississippi, talking about tornadoes that were coming. You said a prayer, and it was a prayer that I think has really been heard around the world now. Like I mentioned, it went viral. Take us through the moment as you were giving that report. What was going through your heart and your mind?
I do not believe that there are coincidences. I believe every possible moment has happened to lead you to this moment. And so last week, leading up to these storms, what we knew could be bad, I came across an article from the Storm Prediction Center. It's an arm of the government that, they're the ones who put out the severe thunderstorm, the tornado watches, their outlooks and things. They look at the big picture. And one of the researchers there put out a big research, project on one of the storms that happened in Oklahoma, high-end EF5 tornado. And it was really cool. I spent hours looking at this. And as part of that, I wanted to apply it to something that I had seen and dealt with. And so I came back to a tornado back in 2011, an EF5 tornado that hit the city of Smithville. And as it would turn out, the track of that tornado and the track of Friday night's tornado was exactly the same. And so for me, it was just, I had all these cities, all these locations already on my heart. And now here we go again. And it's kind of hard to not be overwhelmed in that moment. I've tracked hundreds of tornadoes. Might be underdoing it. But the fact that you knew that these people have already gone through so much in the past, and now we have another major one, it was rough.
Yeah, and you were clearly, during the report, you were looking down, you were tracking, you were seeing this information, you were receiving the information, and you mentioned it being overwhelming. I want to talk about the prayer in a moment, but before we get there, I mean, this is a job where you are, as a meteorologist, you're giving people forecasts of what's to come, and that what you're telling them could have major ramifications. Talk a little bit about that in general. I mean, does that weigh on you a lot? How often do you have a stress level that sort of matches what you experienced last Friday?
Almost never on the second of those questions. Almost never have I had that stress level before. The stress level on Friday was so much about, I mean, my wife is really good at reading radar, and she's one of the anchors of the TV station. I say that because she's watched me do it a lot. My child, I guarantee I could have told you, I need you to look for a blue ball on radar here because that's going to be the debris. And if that's at the same spot that you have the bright green and the bright red, and if you look at the rainfall and there's a big bright red area there as well, you've got a tornado. I could have turned you loose on this, and this was textbook entry level stuff. So a lot of times when we have tornadoes, we're looking for the needle in the haystack. We're trying to put together the pieces of evidence. I'm really good at that. This was just so plain obvious that it wasn't necessary for me to do all the nitty gritty stuff. It's just what words coming out of my mouth are going to hit the end user's brain and make them react. And I'm not saying that then prompted the prayer. I think that then but caused the stress that then required the prayer, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, talk about the prayer, because you said, "Dear Jesus, please help them. Amen." I mean, you paused that report, you prayed, and you went right back into it. What was it that sparked that prayer in that moment? How much control did you have over it? Did it just come right from your heart? I'm so curious about that moment.
We've always taught the kids that prayer does not need to be like a Pharisee, this long, elaborate, like if you have something in your heart, say it. God understands it. And in that moment, I've never been at a loss for words. I mean, we joke, I've never seen an hour I couldn't chew up on TV. And so I could feel that what I was saying was insufficient. It's like if you've ever been in an argument with a spouse, I know you haven't, but I
I think everybody has, yeah.
and you're trying to make a point, and you can see that look on their face that they're just not getting what you're saying. Right. And so I'm at that point where and I'm sure they were getting what I was saying, but I did not feel like it. And I'm like, what I'm saying is insufficient, that I need more. There's just something more. And so it just kind of fell out because we do pray a lot with the kids. It's a huge part of what we do. And And so I guess like anything that you practice without thinking, it just kind of happened.
Well, and I'll tell you, there were a number of people who spoke to media who said, look, we watch Matt all the time. He's who we get our news from and our weather from. And, they felt like that prayer, it sounded like, actually shocked them into taking it very seriously. And some people said, look, you saved lives essentially because of your reaction and how you reacted. I thought that was really intriguing. I don't know if you have a reaction to that, but I'd love to hear, just hearing people say, look, that made me think twice and go get in a bathtub or go hide somewhere.
I have always believed that God allows the end user to hear what they need to hear. I get stories all the time after tornadoes. You said do exactly this and exactly that, and that's when I knew I needed to go. And I can tell you for a fact, I never said those words. I might have said something somewhat similar, but they heard what they needed to hear out of me. And that has nothing to do with me because once it leaves my mouth and enters your brain, how you interpret it has everything to do with the way you've been previously conditioned. And in my opinion, if you can take, I think science and God are interlinked. I believe that God helps people interpret and hear things the way they need to hear it. And so um, I do ask from time to time for people, if you feel compelled, pray for the people of Amory, like if those sorts of things. But I don't lead the prayer. It's public airwaves, and you want to make sure that you don't alienate anybody because, someone's like, oh, he's just gonna like. The hardest thing about, putting the gospel or planting the seed is making sure that the soil is prepped for it. And part of that is you don't prep soil by stomping all over it, and just throwing the seed down. Like it is a gentle process. And so I think that, we prep the soil, and this was a situation where we planted the seed, and I'm hopeful that God will water it.
Absolutely. And, this has been a tough week in America. This particular event, this newscast happened before the shooting in Nashville, but our country is in a desperate condition in so many different ways. And we're not going to talk about any of that today, but I do want to talk about why you think this went viral, because this prayer, this moment was immediately over the course of maybe 2 days after. Almost every outlet was covering it. What do you think it was about that moment that made people so intrigued?
There are a few moments in life where you're going to feel, no matter who you are, a connection to something greater. The birth of a child, the death of a loved one, and at a moment where you just are insufficient. You're at the mercy of, we are all at the mercy of weather, right? I mean, and so to have something that could kill you that you cannot control coming toward you, it's a universal feeling that I think, there are people that go through an earthquake. You don't know when that's coming. So there is the identification I think people have with that, whether they come from, a Christian or a religious background or quite the opposite, they still have a shared feeling there. And I think part of what makes it go viral, and I was talking to kids about this, is, like things that go viral is where you're coloring in the lines with 99% of it, but there's just one thing that goes outside the line, and you choose just that one moment there. And I can't say that I chose this. God chose this. And I do think that everything was normal from what people have probably seen before, except for that one thing. And it did come across as authentic. It was authentic. It did not come from me. I did not intend to pray. I'm not going to say I thought in my head, don't ever pray, but I also never intended to do it. So I do think that it just kind of came bursting out, and that it came in a situation where so many people were hurt and killed. I think that's a big part of the reason why.
Yeah, absolutely. It so deeply resonated. I think you beautifully explained that. And I saw even people who were not Christians. I don't know whether they were atheists or not, but they said, look, I'm not a Christian, but I really appreciate this. And I thought that was actually really interesting to see in some of the comments on YouTube and other places where they were just saying, his heartfelt delivery of this prayer. Really, I think a lot of people appreciated that, and even they appreciated that. But I want to ask you before I let you go, and it's sort of a loaded question, so feel free to take as much time as you need. But obviously, you are a person of faith. You're a believer. Can you talk a little bit about your journey into faith? And I'd love to just hear that. And I'm sure other people would be intrigued as well.
So, so I grew up in church. I grew up in a really small church. I like the joke that the age range in my church, if you go from youngest to oldest, went my brother, and then me, and then my dad. That's and then a bunch of older people, and they were great. They really took us under their wing and nurtured me as I went up. But at the same time, like there were things that you just don't get. Like I got the nurturing of the family and everything that goes along with church. But I didn't think I fully grasped the gospel. I don't think I fully grasped grace and so many of these other components that are critical to being a Christian. I grasped the morality of it and the camaraderie of it more than anything else. And so I have a science background. I went to college, and during my science background, it's very easy to say, "Oh, I don't need to explain that cloud with God. I can explain that cloud with math and physics." And so I drifted. And I think just like I'm going to compare myself to Jesus. I'm not Jesus. I mess up all the time. But just like Jesus had to go in the wilderness in order to be tempted, and then come back from that before he began his ministry. I think I had to drift. I was not submersively baptized until I was pretty much right at my 30th birthday. I'd been sprinkled, like I'd been in church. I could say I was a believer, but I'd never been baptized until my 30th birthday. It was shortly after we moved here to Mississippi. And everything worked out. I was able to fly for next to nothing back to where we had lived before. Got dunked in a pool, came back here, one of the most emotional experiences of my life. And so over the course of time, becoming a father, um, it's amazing to me, like as complicated as we try to make things, I learn more from kids church than I learn from big church sometimes, because it's the small things. We have two kids. One is 7, one is 9, which is why, and they go to a little small, Christian school. So what happened in Nashville is more triggering for me than tornadoes, believe it or not. And while we're on this conversation, the sheriff of our county had texted me a moment ago, saying you're welcome, because he went and visited the school yesterday. Um, but then there's only been 2 times since this that I've broken up. On Friday night, right after, like, I guess it's more Saturday morning, when we got home, my wife showed me a tweet of somebody that said, "This hit me like a ton of bricks." And, and it was the clip. And it was basically the first time I'd seen the clip. And then she went to the profile person, and it said, all the pronouns, this, that, and the other. And the last thing it said was atheist. Isn't that why we're here? Until the whole world hears. That is why we are here.
Yeah.
And then yesterday, I started bawling like a baby. So my son, wrote this. It says, "For God's X-ray vision," and then he wrote this. I'll see if I can read it at the same time. It said, "Everlasting God, I pray that everyone in the world becomes Christians, and you get to know Jesus. Amen. I love you, Jesus, and thank you for loving me." And
That's incredible.
he's 7. I was never there. I'm barely there now, right? But that's one of the things we've always prayed, at night, is that I love you, Jesus, and thank you for loving me. And so it's just Leo's prayer request book.
That's amazing.
My journey. I am excited that they're coming to Christ and fully following Him before I am. And if God can use me in any way, I just pray that He does. And I'm glad this happened. As far as the meteorology on this, the one concern I do have is I'm probably not going to pray on the air every time. It's something. I'm not going to say it loses its effectiveness. That is incorrect. But there are moments where I can't say this. I can say this might happen again, but because it came bursting out of me the first time, I imagine that's probably something similar will happen the next time.
Yeah. Well, I think it definitely made people pause, especially people who watch you regularly, and think twice about what was going on. And you can see, again, in that clip, how you're reacting to what you're seeing. And it's very clear that what you're seeing is serious and that people need to take it seriously. But I think, to your point, there was such a deeper spiritual meaning that did connect with people. And to see those non-believers and those people who might be atheists or they're not sure really connect with that, is incredibly powerful. Matt, I appreciate you taking the time today to come on and talk with us. I really do.
Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it.